get ready to take control of your healthcare. Here's your host, Ray Cobra.
And we're live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Broken Healthcare. My name is Ray Cobra. I am your host, and I am delighted to have with us in the studio, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Jones from Homestead. What's happening, David?
What's going on, Ray? Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us, man. We're excited about the opportunity to talk healthcare and all other assorted topics and subjects.
Right on, David. So we're thrilled to have you with us. So I always like to get started just getting to know my guests, and we've known each other now for a few years. We kind of travel in the same circuits and go to the same boring seminars, but every once in a while you meet someone and it's kind of interesting, and you definitely fall into that category. You're, the audience will get to know you, but you're a unique cat. So, How does a guy like you find his way to the insurance industry? I want you to give us kind of your humble beginnings. I know you've shared some personal stories with me, and it wasn't a straight path from your childhood to where you are today. And I don't care who you are or what your upbringing or background is. No one says they want to go into the insurance industry.
Absolutely.
It just never happens. But tell us a little bit, if you would. Take us back to kind of, let me play a psychiatrist. Throw your feet back on our couch and tell us, where did it all start for you?
So it goes back to, I grew up in a kind of typical urban background and environment. Grew up in public housing projects. Cumberland Gardens. There's a great community to grow up in. Many of the folks who I grew up with were still friends to this day.
Now, for those of us who might not be familiar, where is that?
Okay. That is in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So
Steeltown.
Steeltown, the old Bethlehem Steel. Billy Joel wrote a song about us.
Oh, yeah.
So we're living here in Allentown where the factories have all closed down.
Yeah.
The city actually sued him.
What?
When he wrote that song, yes. And then we'll talk about this later, but when I was county commissioner for Lehigh County, we actually tried to get him to come back to the city and write a song about our revitalization. And he said, "Go kick rocks."
Did he now?
Yes, he did.
Thank you, Billy.
So I grew up in Allentown, poor neighborhood. Just a bunch of folks trying to survive a really, really tough neighborhood. A lot of the friends that I grew up with, by the time I graduated high school, were deaded in prison.
Wow.
And so for me, I chose a path of going to the Army because I said, well, I don't want to hang out on the street. Because all of my uncles and my brothers and my cousins, everybody was drug dealers and hustlers and pimps and all of that.
Yeah.
So success to me was modeled by breaking the law. But when you grow up that way, you don't necessarily think that you're breaking the law.
Right.
It's like, why are the police bothering us? We're not forcing anybody to buy drugs. We're not forcing anybody to solicit prostitution. Why are they bothering with us?
Right.
So that was the kind of worldview that I grew up with. And at 17, I went into the Army. Right out of high school, I was just 17 years old.
Wow.
Trying to get away.
17, you go into the Army. So they didn't find you, you found them?
I found them. I was looking for an alternative pathway.
Okay.
Right? I oftentimes when you're growing up in those environments, I often say this, that the greatest poverty isn't a poverty of economic resources, but more so a poverty of ideals and vision for your life. So I didn't have any vision for my life. So what the military offered was something else.
Yeah.
Be all you can be. Army of one. Hey, sign me up. Sounds great.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess when you're growing up in that environment, and I don't know much about Allentown. I probably the first person that I've ever met that at least I know is from that area. But when, we've kind of talked before and you gave me a little taste about your background and growing up, and I can't even imagine what it must have been like to be in a position to be a young man, not even out of their teens, and see so many people. And just for some context, you're not talking about one or two people, right?
Yeah, I've it's literally about 18 of my friends
18.
dead, and probably another 20 who ended up in and out of prison.
Wow.
I'll give you an example. Good friend of mine growing up, his name was Tyrone Fluker, and we call him Fluke. He's been in and out of prison his whole life. But we came home from high school one day. We were 14. It was middle school. We came home one day, and his mom had packed up everything, taken his 2 sisters, and left. And here's this 14-year-old kid. Comes home, everything is gone, and he's trying to figure out how am I gonna survive? You know, and it's a poor neighborhood. Nobody has enough to share, so he bounces around from house to house to house to house, and it's no wonder that he spends his whole life in and out of correctional systems.
Sure.
So that's kind of like the most common story that I've been exposed to.
Yeah.
So like you grow up, you don't have an age of innocence. You see far too much stuff far too early in life
Right.
that adults shouldn't see.
Right.
You see them as a kid, but to you, it's norm.
Right. Right. No, and that's, you know, what I'm hearing is a story of just the guy who's trying to survive.
Yep.
Right. Forget about skin color or neighborhood or background, or if you're in that position, you're going to do what you got to do to survive. Right.
Yep.
And so the closest thing that I kind of can, did you ever see The Wire on HBO?
I'd love to. I've watched it about 6-7 times.
So it sounds like you grew up in a community or a neighborhood that was very much like downtown Baltimore,
Very
right?
much so.
You're either in the game,
Yes.
or you're not in the game. And if you're in the game, you know that you're kind of playing by the jungle rules.
Yep.
Like it's live or die.
Yep.
Every time you go out, you don't know if you're coming back. And
I have cousins, brothers, uncles who were the first to be sentenced in Pennsylvania under the drug kingpin laws that have done life,
wow,
35 years, 20 years.
right?
And so that was norm,
Yeah,
right? You understood you were playing in an arena.
yeah,
You understood what the risks were,
yeah.
but you felt you had no other options.
Yeah, and you know, so obviously this show is about healthcare and our broken healthcare system, but I think there's something to be said about our broken penal system as well. And I you know, what I've learned watching, you know, expose on 60 Minutes is that you know, it's also a predatory rigged system, and there are, you know, entities that profit when men are in prison. They're making money off of the system. And I think that, you know, that's something that needs to be looked at in this country, because there really truly is no, you know, I'm referring to an old 60 Minutes broadcast that I saw, and they were comparing our system, and I think particularly in Pennsylvania, to let's say the system in Germany. And you can commit murder in Germany and still have a path to reform. They really do believe in rehabilitation. And I think there's something to be said for that. You know, this idea of living in a society where you're, you know, there are exceptions, of course,
Sure.
right? Some folks, I think, don't deserve ever to see the light of day again.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a sliver. You know, I think the vast majority of people out there are caught in the wrong place, the wrong time, or they're just the product of their environment. You know, going back to Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan, right? Let's make a $1 bet and see if this kid off the streets can make it, and he makes it, right? So it's you know, just really, I think as a society we got to start looking at, you know, what are we doing, and does it make sense to incarcerate these people, and just kind of lock the door and throw away the key?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been afforded a very unique perspective on that issue. So how I grew up, shared about my family, in and out of prison, the men in my family, most people I know, but then also. I was a county commissioner for 12 years. So I ran the county of Lehigh for 12 years. And in Pennsylvania, all of your local judicial system, the DA, your common pleas courts, prisons, all report or operate underneath the umbrella of the county. So I grew up a criminal
Right.
that just never got caught. I
Right.
did a lot of things.
Sure.
Right. I just never got caught.
Yeah.
As a young man, but then as an adult, here I am running a system.
Right. Right.
And I would literally be in meetings with the president, judge, and the DA going over things and just break out with a chuckle. And they go, what's so funny? Not just an inside joke, because I would laugh at the fact that only in America
Right.
could somebody who ran from the law all their lives, grew up in that, end up actually running the system.
Wow.
And what's
And
interesting,
so wait, David, they were actually reporting to you?
yes,
So the DA,
Yes.
the judges,
president, judge,
they
yep.
answered to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
I ran the judicial system.
That is wild.
Yeah. So their budget and all of that, if they wanted to build a new building or something, that had to run through our office.
Right. And you weren't dealing with, this wasn't a small little shit kicker town, in the middle of nowhere, right? What was your budget like?
$600 million, 379,000 never satisfied constituents, 2,900 employees, and 9 labor unions to constantly negotiate and fight with
Oh, that sounds like a ball.
for 12 years.
It sounds like a party.
It was wonderful.
12 of the best years of your life, David.
But what you see, just to close a loop on that, but what you see with the way we handle our criminal justice system in America is, you're right, it's not geared toward providing the second chance opportunity. So you never really pay your debt to society, because unlike other countries, that record travels with you. And I'll give you another personal story. I had a brother named Darnell, 2 years older than me. If he was sitting here, we would look just like twins.
Oh, wow.
My brother got caught up in the criminal justice system early, living that life. And he got out, and he tried to turn straight, but he had this record. And so every time he tried to get a job, there's a lot of warehouses in the Lehigh Valley because of his proximity between New York, Philadelphia. He'd get a job, he'd leave his convictions off the record, and then they would ultimately find out and then fire him.
Sure.
So he was forced to go back out on the streets. He wanted to do right,
Yep.
but the system wouldn't allow him the opportunity to do right. He eventually ended up getting arrested again, selling drugs, swallowed a packet of heroin,
Oh.
and it burst in his stomach,
Oh, God.
and he died in prison
Wow.
because the society didn't provide him an opportunity for a second chance.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
That's just a travesty.
Yeah.
And so he was swallowing the drugs to smuggle them in to make money.
No, he was getting arrested.
Okay.
So he tried to swallow them so that when the cops rolled up on him.
He didn't get busted.
Right.
Oh, my God. Wow.
And so what the unique thing is, that very system, the prison that he died in,
Yeah.
I was overseeing for 12 years.
That's crazy.
Only in America.
Only in America. And so did you have an opportunity to make change? Was that part of your agenda, being, coming from where you came from, having a brother that you lost to the system, basically? Was this part of your, like, hey, one of the reasons that I'm here is to enact change, or was it a lot more basic than that? How did you come to that role? Are you an elected official? Did you have powerful people behind you saying, David, we need you, you got to do this, you're the man for the job? And was there an agenda, or is it a lot simpler than that? And was it like, hey man, I need to put food on the table for my family?
It's a lot simpler. My story's an eclectic story.
Yeah.
So if we got time.
Oh, we
right?
got time, baby. That's why you're here.
So I was in the corporate world, right? And I got out of the corporate world. That's a story in and of itself.
Well, tell us, unpack that a little bit for us, because that's interesting.
Okay.
It's not, and how did you, take us on that journey.
Right. So I worked for a company called Avery Dennison.
Okay.
Most people know Avery Dennison for office products and office labels and binders,
Of course.
and pens and markers
Sure.
and labels, right?
Yeah.
So I started with Avery Dennison in 1994 as an entry-level machine operator. I'm just a guy trying to get his life together. I got a wife. I got 4 kids. Don't know I got any kind of skills or anything. I get a great opportunity to work at this plant. And the reason they hired me was because they had just received the federal contract to make what we're all accustomed to now, that is the self-adhering postal stamp. So you and I are old enough to remember when you had to lick a stamp, right?
Yeah. Well, you were, David. Maybe not me.
Some of
too.
the younger people who are listening to this are like, what's a stamp, first of all? And then why would you lick it?
Right. Can't you just email that shit?
Yeah. So they had the contract. So the self-adhering postal stamp was actually developed in Quakertown.
Wow.
And because they had that federal contract, they had to hire people of color, minorities. So I was the first person of color that was hired in this plant. And it was 1994. And I remember in 1994, I was making $21 an hour.
Wow.
In 1994.
That's crazy.
That's good money back then, right?
Yeah.
Double time,
Yeah.
time and a half, triple time, all of that.
Sure.
So I started as an entry-level machine operator. And because I was the first person of color, many of the people who worked there weren't as inviting and open and receptive as you would think. So I was literally, in 1994,
Right.
called the N-word and monkey boy and all these racist statements all day, every day for like the first 4 or 5 months working there. So when I was there and they were throwing the word out, this was my response.
Yeah.
There was another guy that was hired along with me. His name was Tony. Tony was a big bodybuilder. He wanted to fight everybody. Me, this was my response. Because they would say it to your face. And I would look at them and I would say this. You can say whatever you want to say.
Right.
It's not the first time I heard it. It's not the last time I'm going to hear it.
Right.
I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
Everything you and your family got, me and my family going to have.
Right.
I'm going to get this $21 an hour. So you might as well get used to it.
Right on.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
And did Tony beat your ass?
No, Tony didn't make it. Tony ended up getting fired.
No
Because
kidding.
he wanted to fight it. See, my perspective is this: as a person of color, as a black man in America, there are certain inevitabilities. There's a lot of conversation and discussion and culture today around issues of race and inclusiveness and diversity and equity. Is it right? Is it not right? My perspective has always been, and what I've taught my kids is, there's always going to be those folks. And you have a responsibility to yourself. You have a responsibility to the purposes that God has for you to navigate around that. You can't let that be your limitation. That's somebody else's issue.
Yeah.
That's not your issue.
Right.
You can't let yourself get all thrown off track because somebody in their ignorance said something to you.
Right.
And now you're going to respond to that. The moment they see you responding to it is the moment they control you.
Right. Couldn't agree with you more.
During this summer of what is known as the summer of George Floyd, I did a lot of workshops and seminars for different groups on racial reconciliation. So I'm kind of a quasi-expert on the issue. And one of the underappreciated dynamics is we've been around for 250 years. But think about this for a minute. It's only really been about 40 years in which people of color have had full franchisement in the American dream and the American experience.
So you're going back to like Martin Luther King?
Yeah.
So about 60 years?
Yeah.
More or less?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like my daughters are the first full generation to have full enfranchisement
Right.
in the great American experience. And so we're a nation that has consistently struggled with understanding and embracing race and its diversity. For some, they want to not deal with it at all,
Right.
right? And I look at it this, right? You and I, we're right-handed people, right?
Yep.
And so we live in a world that was designed for right-handed people.
Yep.
We don't give two shoots about left-handed people, what they have to deal with, right?
Right.
Everything's designed for right-hand people.
Right.
Right? So if you're part of the
Lefties just have to be ambidextrous.
they just got to deal with it, right?
They got to figure it out.
So if you're part of the dominant culture,
yeah.
the right-hand culture,
Yeah.
right? I get it if you're not sensitive to the dynamics and the issues of left-hand people,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you got something inherently against
Right.
left-hand people.
Right.
It's just not your priority. It's not your concern.
Right. Right. No, 100%. And, getting back to George Floyd, I think anybody with blood running through their veins that saw that murder, they were affected by it because that's what it was. And look, I have family members that are police officers. I have great respect for law enforcement and the police. But look, they're people just like you and I, and there are good and bad everywhere. And clearly that guy was the worst of what a police officer should be. And, he basically killed that guy like a deer, which is inhumane. And, it was that was tragic.
So in addition to my serving as county commissioner and heading the judiciary for the county, I've also served as the president of the Police and Fire Civil Service Board. So I have great affinity with police, right? Have set police policy, police promotion policy, hiring policy,
right?
All of that. And been on a bunch of statewide panel discussions with the governor. And here's the thing. When you have a police officer that violates the trust of the community, because the authority of law enforcement doesn't come from law enforcement. The authority of law enforcement comes from the trust of the people, right? The Declaration of Independence uses these words about government deriving their power from the consent of the governed, right? So law enforcement, the power of that badge is the trust and empowerment of the people. And whenever a police officer undermines the public trust of law enforcement,
right,
that's an issue. And what makes it shaky is if there's a bad doctor, right? Nobody's defending the bad doctor,
right?
Yeah, you're a bad doctor. You need to go, right?
Right.
But I think because of this broad value for law enforcement, the tendency is to try to always defend law enforcement versus identifying what other professions do. Bad doctor, bad attorney, bad contractor, he's bad, he's got to go. And I think what George Floyd and all the follow-up that came from that is as a society and even in the courts, which are ultimately the decision-making mechanism of the juries, people have decided that, we're going to hold individual officers accountable when they violate the greater public trust. And that's what I used to tell officers that were on the Allentown Police Force when we would hire them. And I would talk with every officer that was hired and say, listen, that badge you have, it's the public trust that gives you the authority and the power to take away somebody's freedom. Yeah. You need to respect that.
Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And I think by and large, people get into law enforcement for the right reasons. Sometimes, as with anything else, it's about doing something that they feel drawn to, and they got to put food on the family for their table. On the table for their families. But I like the whole, like the ripple effect after that. I understand the outrage and the backlash, but the whole concept of defund the police never resonated with me.
No,
I just didn't understand it, and I was like, how could anybody possibly be on board with that?
Yeah, that is the consequence of a few ultra-liberal-minded individuals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because when you think about particularly within Black and brown communities.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the communities who benefit the most because of the nature of those communities.
Sure.
From police protection. Those weren't the communities
Right.
that were saying defund the police.
Right.
Like they need the police in those communities.
Yeah.
It was these other
wealthy liberals in their ivory towers.
Yeah. To quote Al Sharpton, if I can,
Please.
not that Al's my God, but Al calls them latte sipping, limousine riding liberals.
So it's funny that you mentioned Al Sharpton. So we're a pretty young show. It's the second time Al Sharpton came up.
Really?
Yeah. So I had Steve Wiggins on, who was the first CEO of United Healthcare Oxford in the Northeast. And he shared a story about he was basically ousted as CEO because he didn't make the best decision, but it was a whole political thing. And he met Al Sharpton in a diner in the city to talk to him because they were both in the newspapers, like the New York Post at that time. And I'm pretty sure, if I have the story right, Steve reached out and they got together. He invited Al to speak at his lily white country club in Connecticut as a guest speaker. And, the board was like, you want to invite who? And Steve said Al Sharpton was the best speaker they ever had.
Now, here's a question. Was it the skinny Al Sharpton?
We're talking maybe. We're probably talking, if I had to think time frame, late 90s.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Still sweatshoot Al Sharpton. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's funny that he came up a couple of times. All right. So we got off the beaten path a little bit, but so tell me, what'd you do in the service? And thank you for your service, by the way.
I appreciate it. So again, I was 17 when I went in, and I didn't know, and I took this. You take this aptitude test, and I took the aptitude test, and I scored in the top 99 percentile. I didn't know what that meant. I had nobody to tell me what that meant.
Right.
So in 1982, I could have taken any job that the military had to offer. But again, I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
And my recruiter, whose name is Staff Sergeant James McGee, you talk to anybody that's been in the military, they will know the name of their recruiter.
Right.
40 years later, it doesn't matter. They know the guy that talked them into it, right?
Right.
So Staff Sergeant James McGee talked me into going into combat arms. So I was a tanker.
Okay.
And because in 82, people who scored high like me, they were giving a $10,000 bonus for taking combat arms.
Wow.
Now, I'm a poor kid coming out of the projects.
Right.
And in 1982, $10,000?
Right. I'm in. Yeah.
Sign me up.
Right.
Sign me up. So I drove tanks. The XM1 Abram Battle Tank. I was one of the first training units to do what they called the one-stop unit training, which was 17 weeks straight of boot camp and AI training.
Wow.
So I could literally drive the world's most advanced battle tank at 17, and I didn't even have a license to drive a car.
That is crazy.
That is crazy.
And so did you see action? Did they have you in active military zones?
No, I did Fort Knox, which was unusual. Being a tanker, you're 9 out of 10 times you're going to do a tour in Germany. All my time was spent stateside. Yeah, Fort Knox, Fort Bliss.
Okay. And so you did that for how long?
Just 3 years.
3 years.
That's all I could take.
3 years was enough.
That's enough. God bless. Listen, you got to be built for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you knew that you were not destined for a long-term military career.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. You were away from home, family, kids. Did you have any kids at that time?
No.
No kids.
No.
Okay. Yet. We're getting to that.
Yeah.
So you leave the service, and do you go from the service to the job that you spoke about?
No, I leave the service and I end up doing the thing that I ran away from.
Uh-huh. So
I end up
you got sucked back in.
back on those streets, man.
Wow.
Me and my brother built a nice little
Empire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice little business.
Sure.
And I eventually became my own best customer. That was because I ended up getting stabbed 9 times down at a club. And it was like that in the streets. The club I got stabbed at 9 times.
Don't you know Biggie's 10 Commandments? Never get high on your own supply.
So this is an interesting story.
Yeah.
So I'll elaborate on this a little bit.
Yeah.
So at the time, my wife, we weren't married then, but she was pregnant with our second daughter. And she had made a decision that she was going to go. She was a woman.
My man's breaking all the commandments.
all of them. So she had made a decision. She was going back to faith.
Yeah.
Right? I had wrangled her out, and she got caught up with a guy like me. And she said, "I'm going back to faith. I'm going back to the church with or without you." And I was like, "Fine, you do you." And I didn't believe her. I came home. She had all my stuff packed up in a plastic bag.
Oh boy.
She said, I'm serious.
That's not a good sign.
No. So I just went on about my business. I wasn't a very good dude then. I had a bunch of other ladies. And one night I'm down at this NCA club, which is the hot spot. And February 21st, 1988, 3 o'clock in the morning. She comes down. They called me up front. They said, "Tracy's at the door." She doing at the door. So I go, because like a speakeasy, you had to get in and special pass, all that. She's there pregnant. I was like, "What are you doing?" She said, "I was home praying. And God told me to come and get you because something bad's going to happen."
Oh, no.
And I'm like, "If you want me to come home, don't put it on God.
Right.
Just tell me,
Tell me to come home.
Yeah, don't put it on God."
Right.
She says, "No, you got to come right now. I'm dead serious, Dave." So I said, "Listen," because I had some deals to make. I said, "Well, come in with me, sit, let me do what I got to do, and then I'll leave with you when I'm done." Sat her down with my friends. I said, "Hey, watch her." And I'll never forget this. I walked away from her. She pulled on my arm. She says, "We have to leave now." Snatched my arm away. Went to the bar. I got a St. Pauli girl and a shot of Apple Barrel. That was my thing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I proceeded to the back bathroom to make a deal. Fight breaks out. 3 guys jump me. I get stabbed 9 times.
Oh,
Face, chest, and head.
wow.
And I'm in the kitchen of the club. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I'm bleeding all over, right? And I can remember sitting there saying, "Man, she told me." Like, it's not like in the movies, your life don't pass before you
Right.
You think about the weirdest things when you think you're gonna go. But I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, "Man, she told me." And then I'm sitting next to, this is gonna be funny, I'm sitting next to this pan of macaroni and cheese. Because it was the kitchen, right? Where you go get something to eat. And I thought to myself, "Man, I'm going to die in the kitchen of the club sitting next to a pan of macaroni and cheese." I was like, so they got me to the hospital, and the doctor was like, "You are so fortunate." I got stabbed in the head. I got scars back of my head. I got stabbed in the chest 3 times. It hit my collarbone each time, and it went up into my neck instead of into my lungs, where I would have drowned in my own blood.
Wow.
And here's the crazy thing. It took me 3 months to recover. There's nothing more, you would think there's nothing more sobering than sitting in the hospital listening to your life on a machine. As soon as I recovered, I was right back out there.
You went right back into the game.
Right back out there. And then that's when the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And in a short amount of time, I went from the guy that walked in the club, pockets full of money, women, all that other stuff, to being stone cold, strung out crack addict.
Oh, no.
I lived that way for a year.
Oof.
Nothing but the clothes on my back. Sleeping from place to place to place.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so I was no angel growing up.
Yep.
I played around with some drugs, cocaine, nothing too crazy, cocaine, weed. Did I say cocaine? Cocaine. There's no R in that word. But I purposely never touched crack because crack is whack.
Yep.
And I've heard like it's not even about willpower. It's just like you get that hit, you're gonna want more. And so what the hell was that like?
It's watching yourself slowly deteriorating with no capacity to stop.
When was the first time you did crack? What did it feel like? Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, and listen, I started getting high when I was like in 6th grade.
Wow.
So again, coming from where I came from, it's
Nothing.
just normal.
Right. But crack at 6th grade, 12, 13?
I think the first time we used to call it make it a cloud. So to think the first time I made a cloud is probably maybe 20.
Okay, 20.
Yeah,
That's a long way away from 6th grade.
Yeah,
That's good.
Yeah.
But then after you got released from the hospital, you went on a downward spiral.
Went on a downward spiral. Instead of being the guy, here's a kilo. Kilos back then it was like $17,000 worth of drugs. You supposed to take it, drop it off somewhere. I'd be
For cocaine?
I'd be somewhere in a hotel with a bunch of girls. Gone for 4 days. Nobody can find me.
Right.
I can't believe I'm sharing all this.
No, well, we appreciate you sharing it. Look, it's an interesting life, and in your case, the result is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because you learned from your experiences, and nobody's a fucking angel out there.
No.
We get to hear about people that are in the public eye because the media is all up in their grill, and I promise you, if you trail anybody, and who's the worst? The worst is that woman, that little old lady that goes to church every Sunday, and as soon as she leaves, she's the worst human being on the planet.
Yeah.
So we all have skeletons. We all have stuff that we've done. But the amazing part of your story, though, is you went through all of that and came out the other end. Now, your wife, I would imagine, said, "I told you so." And
as every good wife does.
But you weren't married at the time.
No, not when I was going through all that. We had kids, but we weren't married.
You weren't married, and so how did you get out the other end of that rabbit hole?
So when I was in it, she let me see the kids, but she kept me away. Right? 'Cause I was messed up, man. I was everything you see in the movies. I was Pookie in the movies, right? That was me in New Jack City. But I had a divine experience. There's no other way to say it. I had a divine experience.
Okay.
I'm in this crack house, and I'm getting high. We had driven this guy, this big dealer, who came in town. He was looking for the people that was working for him. He came to the club I was hanging at, and we said, "Hey, we know where they are. We can take you there." And we took him there, and he took a brick of cocaine. He just broke a big chunk off, and he gave it to me and this guy named Al, right? And so we went back to this drug house, and we're getting high,
right?
And
is this just like an abandoned building somewhere, or is it somebody's crib?
It was somebody's crib that they just like.
Yep, they just opened their doors and were like.
Yep. So I'm there doing my thing, and I remember this to the detail. There was one of those old brown TV trays, remember?
Yeah.
With like ruffled edges, and it was a picture of a farm with the wooden fences. And I'm doing my thing. I'm scraping the pipe and all of that. And then just all of a sudden, a light came on. I can't. And it was my wife and my mom, people praying for me. All of a sudden, a light came on. And I remember saying these words. Devil's trying to kill me. And I fell on my knees in that house. And I said, God, I can't do this anymore. Help me. I need help. I give up. I surrender.
Yeah.
And that night, I dedicated my life to Christ.
Wow.
And I remember I went. And
So, well, I'm sorry. What did you say? That was what trying to kill me? I didn't catch that.
The devil's trying to kill me.
The devil is trying to kill me. So you saw a light. Was it a light like was it a vision, or was it like a light, like the room lit up?
No,
or was it was in your mind's eye?
In my mind, it was just
you saw a light,
a moment,
a bright light
of illumination, like just a moment of illumination where you're able to kind of see beyond yourself.
Yeah,
and you're looking at yourself and your situation, and you kind of realize it for what it is.
You had a spiritual wake-up call.
Spiritual wake-up call. And again, I fell on my knees. I said the prayer of faith. I said, God, I'm done. I surrender. I give up. And I remember the next day I went. My mom was a deacon in church.
Okay.
Right? And when I told my mom, I said, Mom, I got saved. And my mom was like, you got saved? When did you go to church? I said, no, I was in the crack house. And Mom was like, no. If it ain't happened in the church, it ain't real.
Right.
Nobody believed me.
Wow.
The only person that believed me was my wife. And I went, and she moved me back in.
Uh-huh.
She took care of me for 9 months.
Wow.
I had to get myself together, man.
Sure.
I was a mess. And I remember telling her, one day, I'm going to build you a house, and you're never going to have to work unless you want to. Now, I'm saying this as this homeless cracker.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I fulfilled all those promises to her.
Wow.
And my wife is the person who is most responsible for any success that I've had in life. Her belief in me. When nobody else believed in me, when I couldn't believe in myself. She saw the corporate executive, the global director of talent development. She saw the county commissioner. She saw all of that long before I did.
Yeah. Well, and you've been married 39 years, I think you said.
Yeah.
I've been married 34 years. Definitely always a better half. And, they say behind every great man, or behind every good man, is a great woman.
It is true. It is true.
Right? For sure.
It is true. Yeah.
And so when you found Jesus and you said, I've had enough of this life, were you down and out? Had you gone through all the crazy money that you made? Were you in a decent financial spot?
Oh, no, I had nothing.
You had nothing.
I had blown all. See, there's a thing. Fast money goes fast, right? It's the same, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
you can't invest. You can't buy property.
Right.
When you're doing it, right? Unless you have somebody to launder for you. But no, I was broke. I had nothing.
You had nothing.
I had nothing.
And so where do you go from there?
Where you go from there, man?
How long did it take you to get clean? Was there... Well, I don't even know. With crack, is there like a withdrawal process? Is it like heroin? And
Yep, there's a withdrawal process. But for me, and I don't want to sound hyper spiritual, because I'm a committed, devout Christian, but I detest hyper spirituality.
Yeah,
right? If that makes sense.
Okay. Well, what do you mean by that? What's hyper spirituality?
Hyper spirituality is this
someone that's forcing their spirituality on others. Right. I gotcha.
And it's as if God is just going to snap a finger.
Right.
And everything is going to do. And you have no part, no play, no role, no responsibility.
Yeah.
So I started going to AA meetings, and I started going to church, listening to the Word.
Were you addicted to alcohol, or was it more about
just the drugs,
breaking the addiction to drugs?
Yeah, just the drugs.
Okay.
And then I had this moment, and this is not a great commercial for the 12-step program, which I believe in the 12-step program.
Right.
It just didn't work for me.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in this meeting, and I remember this guy gets up. He says, "Hi, my name is John."
Hi, John.
Yeah. Yeah. And he says, and I'm an alcoholic. He says, I'm an alcoholic. And then he goes on to say that he's been sober for 27 years. And I remember sitting there, and I said to myself, wait a minute. He's been sober longer than I've been living, but he's still saying he's an alcoholic. That just didn't resonate for me.
Yeah.
And there was this spiritual prompting in my heart from the Holy Spirit that said, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And that resonated with me. So if I think I'm that, then I'm going to be that. So I took a different path on my way to sobriety and stability. I surrounded myself with faith. I was planted in a local church that was small, but it was full of black men that were the direct opposite of the men I had been exposed to growing up. These were all college educated, husbands, professional, the complete opposite of everything that I knew grew up.
And isn't it
up.
so true that you really, it's like to use I don't even know the quote, but Rocky said it in the movie Rocky. You hang out with yo-yo people, you have yo-yo friends, right?
Yes.
You hang out with smart people, you have smart friends. And it's just, it really is true. It's you become a lot like the people that you associate with.
Yeah. These guys taught me how to find a job, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody I knew had jobs.
Right.
They had hustles.
Yeah.
So I found jobs. My first job was working for a company that made billboard signs back then. They made the things that you rolled up back then before electronic billboards. And it was for like $3.35 an hour. And
$3.35 an hour.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was my first job. I had the job for like 6 months. And I just showed up every day and just
How old are you at this point in your life?
22, 23.
So you get out of the service at what age?
I get out of the service at like 20.
20. And then you go right back into the game.
Yep.
And you told us a story there. And then you have an epiphany.
Yep.
You flip the switch, you change up your friends,
Yep.
and now you're 23,
Yep.
and your first gig is working for $3 and change an hour,
Yeah.
which to a crack dealer back in the day had to be like a fucking joke.
Joke.
You're like, what the hell am I doing? Because anybody would say that, right? They'd be like, what the fuck am I doing here? All right. So, and was that your thought process? But even though you're saying, hey, I used to make this in a minute, it's where you had to be.
I'm thinking, I got to do right by these kids. I got to give my kids something that I didn't have.
Right.
And that's a family and stability. And I can't do that if I can't make money.
Yeah.
And I had this much of a thought process that says no one's going to hire you unless you show them that you can show up somewhere consistently. So I just wanted to just be consistent and just start building kind of good habits in my life. Just trying to do just good daily constructive.
Yeah. And so
things.
did you have the same issue with a criminal record that your brother had?
No,
or
because I never got caught.
You never got caught.
I never got caught.
This episode of Broken Healthcare Podcast is brought to you by Benefixa Healthcare Consultants. Visit Benefixa.com to learn what's possible. Reduce the cost of healthcare for your organization, deliver better outcomes for your people, and yes, design health plans that give your people a path to $0 out-of-pocket costs for healthcare. Visit Benefixa.com today. I got a few friends like that. Yeah. And you know what? The God's honest truth is smart friends, people that the system kind of, one guy in particular, this system had it in for him. And if the system has it in for you, you have no shot.
They're going to come get you.
They're going to come get you. But they honestly, truthfully didn't have a goddamn thing on him. But it's not so much that, I think, as there's a bit of luck involved, right? Because, listen, I was driving around in a car as a teenager with a guy in the back that had a rock of cocaine who's to say that we didn't get pulled over,
Yep.
that wasn't found, and
Yep.
boom, you're in the system.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
So luck and timing have a lot to do with
I
it.
ran faster, and when I was out there, that's when it was big. I mean, you could go up to 6th and Turner Street and in like an hour walk away with $3,500.
Yeah.
So
Boom.
just selling 20s.
Right.
My mentality was some money ain't meant to be had. So if I'm gonna go risk going to jail, I'm gonna risk going to jail for selling packages, not 20s.
Right. Right.
So
right. Yeah.
I didn't put myself in a lot of high risk situations.
You didn't expose yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you didn't have that issue. So now you're working for $3 and change an hour, which even then is a joke.
Yep.
And where do you go from there?
Just from job to job.
Job to job.
Just trying to improve your situation, going from job to job to job. I ended up working for a company called the Greif Companies. And the Greif Companies made men's suits. And I started as a bundle boy, just a guy that would take the fabric that was cut from one side, put it in bins, and then when it was ready, take it over to the other side of the building so the ladies could sew the suits. Periellas, Colors, Bondo, all the expensive stuff.
Yeah.
I was the best dressed poor guy you ever want to see. They would have these employee sales where you get these $500 suits for like $30.
Right.
Man, right. So I was going to church on Sunday looking good.
You're looking sharp.
right.
Right.
No money in my pocket, but I was looking good.
Right.
So I worked there for a while, and I don't know how much into this you want me to go.
No, I want you to go.
I was making $550.
Okay.
By this time, we're married.
Okay.
So I got a wife,
Yep.
4 kids.
4 kids.
I'm making $550 an hour.
You were in your late 20s.
Yeah,
You better be.
yeah. By now, I'm like 26.
Okay.
27. I'm making $550 an hour.
Okay.
Wife, 4 kids. I'm living at 40 South Howard Street, 3-bedroom house in an alley,
Wow.
and our rent was $615 a month,
Wow.
and I'm making $550 an hour.
That math is tight.
Right. I couldn't even get excited about payday
Yeah.
because the money was already gone.
Yeah.
And I remember the temptation to go back out and sell drugs. Because my brothers and all them was like, man, why are you struggling? Why just take a package and just go and flip it and,
Right. Put some money in your pocket.
Yeah, put some money in your pocket. And I remember I'm between the bins and I'm going through it, man. It's a lot of weight, just struggling.
Sure.
And I prayed with tears in my eyes. I said, God, I don't know how I'm going to take care of this family. And I don't want to go back on the streets.
Right.
You got to help me. And I heard this unction from the Lord. He said, it's not your job to take care of your family. It's your job to seek me first. I'll provide for your family. Make me your priority. And I purposed at that moment that I was going to make the pursuit of God my priority, believing his promises that if you seek first the kingdom of God and all of his righteousness, then all these things shall be added unto you. So don't worry about what you eat, what you drink, what you wear. I know you have need of these things. So I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't have family connections. So all I had was faith.
Right.
Either believe what he says
Right.
or trust $550 an hour with $615 a month rent.
I can't even imagine that. So, David, people are going to be listening to this. They're going to be watching it on YouTube. They're going to be like, does David think he's Moses?
No.
Like, was there a burning bush? Where was God? Where was he hanging out? Like, this is not a normal thing that people, I don't think the average person doesn't have your life experience, to be sure. And I think people find God when they're at their lowest,
Yep.
right? It's like one of my favorite poems that my mom had a printout of was Footprints. If you know Footprints, the kind of the punchline is, when I was at my lowest and my worst, why weren't you there with me? And of course, the punchline that brings a tear to everyone's eye is, well, it was then that I carried you, right?
Yep.
And so I think when people are at that low point and they have nowhere else to turn, that's when they turn to God or Jesus. And listen, there are plenty of people out there that are non-believers, and I am not a high holy roller.
Yep.
I am a Roman Catholic, but I am a non-practicing Roman Catholic. But you bet your ass when when I need God,
When it hits the fan.
I call him. But in your case, you felt like a connection that was real, like God was talking to you, and it was a real turning point for you.
Yeah. Listen, when somebody sticks an ice pick in you 9 times,
You're lucky,
and your wife comes down to tell you,
right?
you don't listen,
Right.
and you still walk out of the hospital.
Right. What kind you want? You need us to draw pictures for you, David?
So for me,
Right.
my whole walk, and this is what I talk about earlier when I talk about the hyper spirituality.
Right.
Like, I believe that God speaks to our hearts, that God opens doors, He moves, but there's a part we have to do. I had to show up for work every day.
Right.
I had to be faithful in the little things.
Right.
Right. It wasn't just boom.
Right.
And
Well, the other thing is, people of color, for whatever reason, you see them win an award, an Oscar, an Emmy, a Grammy. So many of them thank Jesus first.
yep.
And, again, to people who are non-believers, and everybody's, got their own thing
Sure.
and their own faith. But that always strikes me as just the ultimate bit of humility. It's just I think it's a great thing. When I see people do that, it just tells me about their character.
Yeah.
And I don't know, honestly, that I would do that. But it strikes me that, it's particularly with people of color, they will praise God and thank Jesus for that moment. And where does that come from, do you think?
Well, if you hang out with a bunch of us, this is what you'll hear us say to one another: the struggle is real, because it's a struggle.
Yeah.
So people will look post. I was a global director of talent development for a Fortune 300 company. I got to run a county for 12 years. I get the privilege of being a VP of sales for Homestead. Great RBP level funded solution. People look at that and go, wow, but they don't know the struggle
Sure.
to get there.
Right.
And it's just a recognition that I didn't get there on my own.
Yeah.
Just an acknowledgement that I had help.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
So we're gonna get to your solution, which is an important one. But there were a few steps along the way before you got there.
A lot of steps.
Right? And so give me just kind of the breakthrough from, going from kind of mediocrity, this sub $10 an hour position to the next leap.
Yeah, I think I could summarize it up this way. It was individuals taking a risk of investing their influence and capacity on me. So I started at Avery's as entry-level machine operator. There was a woman named Connie Wayne. And Connie Wayne saw me at a train-to-trainer session. I was just a factory worker on the floor. Went to this trainer session because it was going to be a week in Cleveland and I could get away from a house of a bunch of kids. I'll go to Cleveland for a week.
Right.
No
I'm in.
problem.
Right.
And at the end of that week, she comes up to me. She says she was the director of training for Avery's largest division. And she said, "I've been watching you all week. You're not an ops person. You're an HR person." I had no clue what she was talking about. She said, "Give me a call," and that opened a door. And Avery saw things in me that I didn't know I had. They invested. They believed in development. They believed that their greatest competitive edge was their people. And they really, really invested in their people. And they invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in my professional development. And I ended up being the face of leadership development for
Wow.
Avery Dennison, running, they had 8 divisions globally, facilities in 42 countries. I ended up managing the entire global talent development pipeline, 427 top global operational positions.
Wow.
And I did that as a kid coming out of projects, man.
That's remarkable. It really is remarkable.
I ran executive coaching. I worked with industrial psychologists, PhDs out of MIT, developing competency architectures, assessment, interviewing, experiential interviewing, all that stuff.
And at that
awesome.
point, they gave you a raise to $15.50 an hour.
At that point, I had stock options, and I was just living a life that I couldn't imagine that I would have the opportunity.
So what I hear when I hear this story is the leadership at Avery had to really be intact. They were on their A game.
Yep.
Because it's not every organization out there that would have the presence to cherry pick someone from the lower ranks and identify that their skill set is being wasted,
Yeah.
and they're way better put to use elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so, did that come from the top level?
That was the top. Avery's philosophy was that they did what they called the 9-box thing. So they identified high capacity talent, and then they matched you with a mentor. And Avery would never move you into a role if they didn't think you had the capacity for 3 roles beyond that. So that when you moved into that role, there was already a development pipeline and mentors and platforms that were intended to get you to that second and third. Part of their philosophy was you don't clog the pipeline. Because if you got talented people, you put them in a position and then there for 5 years, you're blocking other talent from growing in the organization. And they're eventually going to end up leaving. So I ended up running the very process that produced me.
Wow.
So I had mentors. I was given exposure to certain platforms, emotional intelligence.
Sure.
So I was one of the first people in the country that got trained by Dr. Boyatis, who was out in Case Western on emotional intelligence back in like 97,
Wow.
maybe 98.
Going way back. And so tell our audience, what is emotional intelligence? What does that even mean?
So emotional intelligence is, when we think of IQ, intellect, there's EQ. And emotional intelligence has to do with emotional capacity that is measured on 4 levels. So it's the ability to recognize your own emotional triggers. It's the ability to manage those emotional triggers. It's the ability to recognize them in others and then manage them in others, which is called relationship management. And the whole ideal is that if you're not emotionally in tuned and intelligent, you're never going to be good at relationships. You're never going to be good at leadership. You're never going to be good at managing. Because at the end of the day, as human beings, we are emotional entities, right?
Yeah.
And so emotional intelligence, you take 5 people of equal intellect, and what's going to be the distinguishing factor between those that rise? It's their EQ.
And so with one of the words being intelligence, I would read into that I can improve, I can
Yes.
work on this, I can get better at it.
And one of the things you need to work on is the recognition of your own emotional triggers, and then be able to manage those. And you think about, so take it out of the pure EQ language and just put it in terms of leadership and relationship management and what we do in our business, which is so much about relationship management. If you can't recognize something like, okay, here's my trigger. And if I can't recognize, I'm getting ticked off.
Right.
Or maybe I'm talking too much.
Right.
Or maybe I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then manage that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult to really develop relationships with people.
Well, and I think we all, struggle with that to a certain extent. I know that I do. And sometimes I think I've gotten better with age and over time. And I think, typically if you're younger, you're more hot-headed, you're more prone to fly off the handle.
Yeah.
But, listen, love him or hate him, look at our president-elect. He probably doesn't have the highest emotional intelligence rating.
No, here's what I would say.
Yeah.
I would say, and I've said this, I think he has a very, very high emotional intelligence.
Is that right?
Yeah. He is masterful at playing the dynamics of people. Now, you can, whether you want to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, that's a whole nother conversation. But
It seems perfectly reasonable. Why not?
if you just take a look, he's really, really good example because he's good at connecting with people and playing on elements and dynamics in people.
I guess what I'm getting at is if you watch the debate between him and Kamala Harris, she baited him and he took the bait every time.
True.
Every time. So he's not the greatest at, just being able to kind of be, pull back and not take the bait. He's not that guy.
Right.
But to your point, I think you are right. He is a master of people.
So on the bottom quadrant, the people quadrant, the top quadrant is self. The bottom quadrant is people. Yeah.
There we go. So you're in this incredible position at Avery.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's got to be very comfortable. What happens?
I'm living on a plane. I'm flying to Europe, sometimes for 2 weeks at a time. Sometimes I'm flying just for a meeting. Talk about talent.
Yeah.
And then flying back the next day. So I'm on a 2-week tour, and I'm sitting in the downtown Munich hotel, and I'm listening to my second oldest daughter get ready for her senior prom on the phone.
Oh, no.
And at that moment, I had this epiphany. Just like my dad. I grew up without my dad. My dad wasn't there. And I realized I wasn't there. Different reasons.
Right.
I'm out making money. I'm giving my kids everything I didn't have growing up.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there. I wasn't there for soccer games, violin recitals, and now here's my daughter at her prom, and I'm listening on the phone.
Right.
And I made a decision that I was going to walk away because what was more important was being there for my kids. And I remember when I went to Steve Minot was my boss, and Steve Minot was a great boss. He used to be a roadie for Queen.
Oh, wow.
He was not a corporate guy at all. He was awesome.
Right.
He was awesome. And I went to him and I said, Steve, I'm leaving.
He must have had some stories.
Oh my God. Oh,
That must have been great.
British guy. Steve was great.
Right.
Avery threw a lot of money at me to stay, and he gave me the best advice in life I ever had, ever.
Really?
He said, Dave, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do to you. We're going to give you golden handcuffs. They're going to give you so much money, they're going to put you in a position, and they'll make it comfortable for you for a year, and they're going to get you back out on the road, and they're going to give you a salary that's almost impossible to replace. He said, when we do that, we got you. He said, don't do it. He said, you want to get out? Go now. He says, don't be like me.
Right.
And he told me, he said, if he had a choice, he would have a landscaping company. He says, but they got the golden handcuffs on me. So I'm here.
Right. Wow.
And I took that advice and I left.
That's crazy. And it's not easy to walk away, right? When did they make you an offer, or they did make you an offer?
They made me offers. In fact, they were willing to fire the HR person in the plant by where I lived, just so I could stay with the company.
Wow.
And they could just tap into my brain.
Right.
Right. Same kind of salary and stuff, just.
Right.
But I knew I had to go.
Yeah.
I just knew. Everybody thought I was crazy.
Right.
My family thought I was crazy.
Sure.
Not my wife and my kids.
Sure.
Because my wife was like, listen, you gotta decide, is it us or is it the career?
Right. Right. Well, And I think that's part of the journey, right? We live in a world where there is no such thing as having your cake and eating it too. There kind of is. You can make a case for it here or there, but generally speaking, we live in a world of opposites.
Yep.
If the universe gives you this, you got to give up that. That's usually kind of the way that it works. And I look at life and I say, we come to forks in the road many times on our journey, and it's the route that we take that defines who we are. And sometimes it's not the road that's got sunny skies and, beautiful blue skies with sunshine and rainbows. It's the one that's got thorns and that's got thunder and lightning, and that has to be our road. And sometimes choosing that road gets us to the rainbows and the sunshine and all of that stuff. But it very rarely comes without a price. There's usually a price that you have to pay, and so the Avery position would have been great on many levels, rewarding, lucrative, etc. But you chose not the easy path, the hard path, because you recognized that, the more important thing was to be with your family. And, you already missed so much at that point.
I had 3 more that were coming through the pike. I was like, you know what? I gotta choose family.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, did you make the right choice?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So where do you go from there?
So from there, I left, and I had become an ordained minister, right? In all this story, right?
Yeah.
And so I went to work for my home church as the executive pastor, so taking all my business experience. It was a large church, and so all the things that are necessary in any large entity, right? Large churches, you still need that same business stuff.
Sure.
So I became the executive pastor, and we built the church from 400 to 3,500.
Wow.
5 campuses. And but while we were doing all that, I got bored because I had all this capacity.
Right.
And the church could only use up but so much.
Yeah.
And so I'm at a party, and I'm talking about, all the stuff government should be doing locally, because I traveled. I was on the road. I'd come home, visit the family, leave out again. So now I'm home, and I'm looking at all the stuff that's happening around our community, and I'm at a party giving out all these big opinions and stuff. And a friend of mine's wife said, "Well, Mr. Know-It-All, if you know so much, why don't you run for office?"
Okay.
So I ran for office.
Wow.
Lost my first race. I ran for city council, and I lost my first race.
Oh, how'd that feel? That sting a little? Yeah.
Listen, when you run for public office, man, I don't care what party a person is. When you run for office, man, you're putting yourself out there. And it's the biggest, it's a public rejection, right?
Yeah.
Everybody sees it. Everybody sees the votes. Everybody sees
Right.
Right. So that stung, and that was my first time.
Well, so was there, you always hear, and I don't know if it happens quite at the local level, but if you're going for like a presidency or a governor or a mayor of a big town, they're always going to look to dig up dirt on you. And you had a lot of dirt in your past. Did they pick up on that? Was that the focus of any of your competitors?
No, I just didn't have name recognition. No one knew me.
Yep.
Right. So.
And you never got caught.
And I never got caught. Yeah. So.
Right.
And then we ran for county commissioner, and we won.
Wow. Was that a different office? Mm-hmm. It was a different office.
So that's the city level, and then the county level.
So you lost the small fish.
Yep.
And you caught the big fish.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was the first person of color elected to be county commissioner.
And why do you think that was? Do you think people were fed up with the incumbent?
think it was a lot of different things.
Timing.
Because it was 2008 and Barack Obama was running for president, and there was all this energy and excitement
Sure.
about the first person of color to do stuff.
Yeah.
And I just came in with a simple vision. Like I've never been an idealistic politician.
Yeah.
I think idealism blinds you to solutions. And I came out of business, so my approach to county government was what needs to be fixed and what's the best approach to fixing it. So I was very pragmatic.
Sure.
So when I won and I got sworn in, and my wife and my son were standing next to me when I got sworn in. My son stood next to me at all three of my swearing-ins.
That's cool.
That was cool. And my first election, because it was so close to around 2008, the media came up from Philadelphia. They wanted to interview me. Yeah, you're the first black county commissioner. And I told them all, I don't want to be known as the first black county commissioner. I want to be known as a competent commissioner. My job is to serve all the citizens of Lehigh County with competence.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm committed to. See, because if I let them define me, then they would narrow my agenda.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and really, I mean, I think that's to a large extent why Trump won. People weren't hearing the same old politics from him. And I think change, is important when you're in a place and you feel like, you're just getting by and you're just scraping along and there's no true vision for what your future can be and can look like. Yeah, he just told better stories.
Yeah.
But I think to your credit, coming in and not letting them define you, but instead saying, I'm here to do a job. I'm going to do that job for everyone to the best of my ability because that's what I signed up for. I mean, that's all the credit in the world to you. And so what were some of the things that you ran on? What did you see that you thought you could fix and make better? And do you think, your appeal to the people? What platform are you running on?
Fixing roads and bridges.
Really? Not rocket science, right?
Because in Pennsylvania, counties are like the social safety net of the state. So all your state funding, all your federal funding, child protective services, family services, domestic relations, courts, prisons, judges, DA, water conservation, economic development, open space management.
It's a lot, David.
It's a lot. No, it's
a lot.
It's a lot. So
you getting flashbacks?
so it's really about having your feet on the ground and being very pragmatic and being solution oriented.
Yeah.
So like one of the things I'm most proud of in my 12 years is that we rebuilt 26 bridges and roads.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't happen on its own.
Yeah. And that's something people take for granted unless you're driving on a bad road. You're like, why somebody fix this road? What is this? We built a baseball stadium in partnership with the state of PA. So the Phillies AAA team is in Allentown.
Wow.
In the Lehigh Valley.
That's cool.
In the county, we built a state-of-the-art minor league ball stadium for the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. You can look them up, and they're like the top 3 minor league baseball franchises in the country.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And that was all done on your watch.
Yeah.
Right on.
Wasn't solely just me.
Right, of course.
It was really a partnership. Ed Rendell was the governor at that time, and the folks from the Phillies.
You had a team.
And we just issued the bonds. That's it.
Yeah. Very cool. And so 12 years is a long run.
Mm-hmm.
And did you get to see your family more while you were doing that?
Absolutely.
You did, because you were home. You weren't.
You're home.
You were home.
Yep.
So did you lose an election, or did you say enough is enough?
No, I lost my last election because after 12 years, I said enough is enough. I didn't want to be county commissioner anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be mayor of Allentown.
Okay.
I wanted to be mayor of my hometown.
Okay.
Right. because I felt I could impact more of the things in the city than I could at the county level.
Yeah.
And the current mayor at that time was under FBI investigation
Okay.
for selling city contracts. The guy who was a friend of mine,
Right.
who helped me get into politics.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I ran, I took him out to lunch. I said, "Here's why I'm running. You need to resign.
Yeah.
You know, you got 8 people in your administration that have already pleaded guilty, and you're still saying you ain't do it."
Wasn't me.
He's now doing 13 years up in Danbury.
Oh, man.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
When I ran in the primary, he still ran,
Right.
and I lost.
Wow. No kidding. Phew. So he had some support. Crazy.
Because nobody believed he did it.
Right. Right.
Regardless of all the people in his administration.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So that had to be humbling.
Yep.
And then your next move from there was not politics.
No, this is how I get into the industry.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
So in my last year, I had already declared I wasn't running again. I'm going to run for mayor. The chief financial director tells me, "Hey, county's probably going to have to raise taxes in 2 years." Even though I'm not going to be there, I'm thinking, well, we need to do some things to try to bend down cost to either avert or delay. So what do? You look at your biggest items, the folks we work for, what they do every day. Where's my biggest line items? How do I bend that? And self-funded health plan was the largest one, $36 million.
$36 million.
So BB&T at the time was our broker. So I called them BB&T.
Right.
Say, "Hey, is there anything we can do?"
We could do something, but it's going to sting a little. Right.
Yeah, ain't nothing we can do.
Right.
Yeah, ain't nothing we can do.
Right.
So I started doing my own investigation, and I stumbled across reference-based pricing.
And so, folks, that's kind of the point, right? It's healthcare's big lie
Yep.
is that you can't do anything about the cost of healthcare, and that's coming from the insurance carriers. It's coming from the brokers that are the sales force of the insurance carriers.
Yep.
And it took you, at this point, an accomplished business executive with an incredible background managing super large budgets to look at this and zero in on one of your biggest line items and say, is there something we could do about this? And the first answer you got was? And so where did you go from there? And so you started doing your own research.
I started doing my own research, and I stumbled across reference-based pricing. And so I called a couple of vendors to come in to talk. And a couple of the well-known RBP, right?
Sure.
They sent a rep.
Yep.
But then there's one company, the owner came. Tom Knox.
Okay.
The owner of Homestead.
Yep.
I said, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So we talked, and we did the proposal and did all of that stuff. And because it was my last year and I was like a lame duck,
Right.
I had the authority to say, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
You can't lead that way.
Right.
You had to get buy-in from everybody.
Sure.
And I couldn't get the buy-in because they knew, well, you're gone
Right.
at the end of the year.
Right.
So it didn't happen. And Tom found out that I was also running for mayor. And when I lost, he reaches out to me. He says, "So what are you going to do next?" I said, "I don't know. I still have a couple more months left in my term. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know this. I don't ever want to run anything again. I don't want to supervise people. I don't want to be responsible for a budget again."
Enough. I've had it.
Yeah, I'm done.
Right.
I just want to do something just kind of me. And he said, "I got the perfect job for you." Like,
So wait a second, you being recruited.
I was being recruited.
All right.
So
and
that's,
do you and Tom go way back, or was that your first time meeting him when he came out to pitch?
No, it was my first time when he came out to pitch, and then a mutual friend of mine introduced me to him, and he contributed to my campaign. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Very cool. And so you're overseeing this pretty robust budget, over $30 million budget, $35 million, I think you said. And you want to do something about that, and you do some research and reference-based pricing, for folks that may not know anything about reference-based pricing, give us a flavor. What exactly is it? And what did your early, research tell you about the opportunity?
Reference-based pricing, simply put, uses Medicare as a reference point for establishing a fair market reimbursement.
Mm-hmm.
So typically your BUCAs, as we call it, Blue, United, Cigna, Highmark, Aetna.
Right.
Their value proposition is I can get you a good discount off of the hospital's charge master price.
Yep.
That inflated price that has no market value, no market determination at all. It's just a made-up price. We can get you a good discount.
Right.
What reference-based pricing is basically rather than taking an overinflated discount, we're going to do it as a reference of Medicare.
Right.
And the difference generally is between 170% of Medicare as a reimbursement or 240% of Medicare.
Right. And so the bottom line is when you're using Medicare as a reference point, and, for folks that are age 65 and over that have Medicare, this is the reimbursement that a provider can expect when they treat a Medicare patient. Reference-based pricing takes that, typically, puts a nice markup on that, 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100%. And that is now the reimbursement. And so if you think about it logically, well, if a provider is getting paid, and providers, of course, will say that they're not making money on Medicare reimbursement, but the reality is they are, and the more efficiently their organizations are run, the more profitable they are with a Medicare reimbursement. But what the reference-based price does is it kind of level sets, right? Because if you just take a procedure like, I don't know, a CAT scan, and you go to a hospital and you have that scan, there might be 200 different prices on their charge master for that same exam, right? So it starts at the moon, whatever, $20,000. And, they'll have a variety all the way down to the Medicare price. So what is happening in a typical system is there's a discount off of that Medicare price, as opposed to RBP, which is taking the baseline and it's saying, okay, this is where Medicare reimbursement is. We're going to mark this up, and you almost always end up below the biggest discount of an insurance carrier.
And additionally, one of the things that we do is we take a look at what every hospital that receives Medicare, Medicaid reimbursements has to provide information to the Center for Medicare Services concerning their cost. The proverbial knee surgery. This is what it costs us to do the knee surgery. So we use two references for reimbursement. One is Medicare plus a percentage, and then the other is their cost to charge ratio. This is what you said it cost you. Now we're going to give you 20% on top of your cost. You ask any business owner in America today, if you could be guaranteed 20% profit over top of your costs, would you take that?
Right.
Most of them would line up and say, absolutely, sign me up.
Right, for sure. And so I would imagine, healthcare not being your business prior to coming into it is like baptism by fire. You had a pretty big learning curve. There's a lot for you to learn, a lot for you to know. But what made you feel comfortable that you were in the right place at Homestead? Because really, I mean, you could have done anything at that point. You were, managing a tremendous budget. You had an incredible track record. And so the world was your oyster. What was it that, other than, not having to deal with the responsibility of managing others, et cetera, the stuff that you mentioned, what was it that drew you to Homestead? What made you think, hey, this would be a good fit for me?
This is going to sound corny.
Yeah.
It was Tom Knox and his vision.
Tell us a little bit about Tom. Who's Tom?
Oh, Tom is Tom is.
Maybe Tom should be here. We got to get him next time.
Oh, listen, Tom is amazing.
Yeah.
He is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur.
Really?
So Tom grew up in the housing projects in Philadelphia. Tom's a self-made man.
Okay.
Never been to college.
Really?
He went to the Navy at 16 to get away from a bad household. Lied on his age. Came out and got into the life insurance.
How does that even happen? Could that happen today?
No. All the records and all that.
Back then, it was like paper. You take out an eraser, you erase the last number, you write in a new one.
So Tom had been successful starting a bank. Him and his wife owned a real estate company. They have Knox Investments. Tom has a bunch of different stuff. But Tom also was the president of United Healthcare for Pennsylvania and Delaware. And he wanted to build a better mousetrap. And so his vision for how to empower employers to be able to offer high quality, low cost, sustainable health plans. Having been in the position of many of the clients that we work with and understanding those struggles and dynamics every year. Okay, what are we going to do about increases? Sitting across the table from union reps and them saying, all right, Jones, save all the BS because whatever you're going to give me in cost of living increase, you're just going to take it out of the other pocket on healthcare, right?
Right.
Like having been through all of that.
Sure.
Like the real thing when Tom was casting vision for this solution and how the solution can be an empowerment for employers, because I lived it, I bought it. If I had been in the industry and had been shaped by the industry's paradigm, might have been different.
Right.
So my slate was blank. So they originally hired me just to be a consultant. They've used your relationships. So I was also on the board of governors for the Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce, which is, if you look at them, they're the 6th largest chamber in the country. And they're active and very politically influential.
Right.
In PA, because Lehigh Valley is the 3rd largest population center in the state. And so I had a lot of connections. So in the beginning, they just paid me handsomely to just set up meetings.
Yeah.
And I would go and the people I knew, set up meetings.
Yeah, sure.
Right? I didn't know I was ticking brokers off going around. I didn't know any better.
Right.
I was just setting up meetings. And did that for a while, and then I started realizing, wait a minute. The hardest part is getting folks to the table.
Yeah.
I'm getting into the table, and then someone's coming in and swooping up all the commission.
Right.
I was like, hold up, wait. What do I have to do? What do I have to do to get into sales? Well, you got to go get licensed. So I went and got licensed, and after 2 years, transitioned into sales.
Okay.
What I like the most about what we do is I really do believe in the philosophy behind RBP. We're not the only RBP vendor, but the underlying value that it provides to employers, as well as the tool that it provides employers to provide to their employees a higher quality, low-cost health plan, helping them to keep money in their pockets, lower their monthly contributions, lower their deductibles. That's real dollars for families.
Yeah.
I like that mission.
Yeah, well, because you know that it's possible. And I think the hardest part of being a next-gen advisor, being a Health Rosetta advisor, being not someone that's playing by the rules of the game and the system, not being a puppeteer of the insurance carrier. The struggle for folks that do what I do as a healthcare consultant and a true benefits advisor is just getting people to suspend disbelief and just getting them to think, there is something that I can do about this. I can actually make a difference. I can drive savings in the realm of 30 to 60%. It's possible. And once you get that and once you experience it, because even for me, as someone that had been in the insurance game since 2001 is when I started with Aflac. I had been around broker meeting after broker meeting during open enrollment, supporting brokers, traditional mainstream brokers. And the news was always bad, right? It was always, hey, your rates are going up. The benefits are going down. And so you're paying more for less. And it is what it is. So I got conditioned like everybody else to say, oh, it is what it is. But that's bullshit.
Yep.
It's not. That's not what it is. What it is you're playing by the rules that they set. And what we do is we play a different game altogether.
Yes.
And so that, takes a real leap of faith. But I think we're at a tipping point now. And I think the first time, even though I'd been in the game for a while, the first time that really the light bulb went off for me is I was at one of Nelson Griswold's conferences. I think it was probably one of the Ascends. And he had Marshall Allen, who may rest in peace. He passed away recently, died prematurely. But he was a tremendous advocate in our industry, someone who was a trained reporter, investigative journalist, amazing guy. And he was the first guy that I heard say that we're in a healthcare bubble. Mm-hmm. And we had been in a bubble for a while, but it was the first time that I heard anyone kind of use those words. And it just really landed with me. And I said, you know what? He is right. We are definitely in a bubble. And I think we're at a point now where we are at a tipping point. Now, I hedge my bet always, and I say, knowing what I know and knowing how big the bubble is, because we're basically a $5 trillion industry now, 20 cents of every dollar that we're spending is healthcare. There are an awful lot of people that have a lot to lose if things change, right? So I always it's always in the back pocket thinking, I don't consider myself an idealist. I somewhat am an idealist. I like to think positively. I like to think about a brighter tomorrow. And when I think about what is possible, it excites me. But then I the other business sense, kind of the more practical, pragmatic Ray is like, they're going to squash you like a bug. You have no shot, right? They're going to crush you. But I think so you come to Homestead and the business model, and it's interesting to me that your leader came from a background where he was president of United Healthcare, the biggest entity in the healthcare space in the U.S. So he knows where all the bodies are buried. He knows all of the different profit centers that are in their business. And he thinks to himself, there's got to be a better way. And so Homestead was his stab at a better way. When did he start the business, and what was the journey like for him?
Homestead began functionally in 2014.
Okay.
So the first step that he did, our name Homestead, because oftentimes brokers will say, "Are you guys a mortgage company?" It's Homestead. It doesn't sound right.
Right.
Not one of those sexy industry names. Right?
Yeah.
He purchased Homestead Insurance Company that had been around for 68 years, property and casualty.
Okay.
And he capitalized it and turned it into a reinsurance platform. He then purchased Index, which is a TPA, based in Lyndhurst, New Jersey. At the time, they had been around for 47 years, had a lot of traditional legacy groups with unions and teachers in Jersey. So he took these two entities that had long history and experience, and then he built with a gentleman by the name of David Fishbone a repricing platform, a proprietary repricing engine. We do it all ourselves.
Yep.
And so he created this one-stop model. So we own the TPA, we own a reinsurance company, we own a repricing platform. They develop quota share partnerships with U.S. Fire, Pan American, Gerber nationwide. So we write on their paper, but we share risk with them. So he built a one-stop, built in there a PBM, care management provider, all those elements that are necessary for sustainable, level-funded or self-funded health plan. He built all of that together and took it to the market. in 14.
Wow. And so when you say he built it all together, so what I'm hearing is Homestead is a health plan?
Yes.
So all of the pieces, so folks, in a traditional arrangement where you have a benefits advisor who is coming in and they're building a custom plan, you're relying on their expertise to put all the pieces together, bring all of these ingredients together like a master chef or a Michelin star chef. And if they're good at their game, you're going to end up with a Michelin star result, right? If they're not good at their game, you're going to end up with something that you'd rather not dine on. And there's a lot of that out there, so you have to be careful. But so I'm curious, do you have flexibility in your program, because you mentioned that you have a PBM built in? What if an advisor wanted to bring a PBM that they have a relationship with because they've got a running track record? And I think the hard part for any employer, HR director, CFO that might be listening in is, look, I buy United Healthcare. It's a one-stop. Everything is in that package. I don't worry about it. It's set it and forget it. And I know I might be getting price gouged, but I have a business to run. Like, I can't be bothered with this shit until they really slow down the music and hopefully work with a reputable advisor who shines light on the fact that operating expenses are important. And if you don't look at your operating expenses or you turn a blind eye to it, you're bleeding money for your organization. And if we can show you a way to cut your biggest operating expense after payroll, because healthcare typically is, if we can show you how to cut that by 30 to 60%, that's money that drops straight to your bottom line and deliver a better result in terms of the quality of care for your people. Is that something you might be interested in? And no, it's not a fucking fairy tale. It's something that we do every day. Then, you may get their attention. But I guess back to my point, you have to work with a reputable advisor that can bring all of those ingredients together, or have a health plan where all of that is kind of baked in. So I'm hearing that you're a health plan that all of that heavy lifting has been done when they come to Homestead. But is it that way or the highway?
No. There's the ability to carve out. So we can carve out stop loss. We can carve out PBM. In some cases, some particular brokers like a particular care management provider. And that space has kind of evolved. There are some that are a lot more sophisticated and engaged in cost containment rather than just, that's covered on your plan. All right, go where you want to go. Right? They're involved in steerage. And those are the ones we like to work with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so what has the experience been like? You've been with them now for several years. Are you finding that you hit the easy button here? Is it just, hey, my life is a dream and there are never any complaints or any issues? It's all roses, or not so much?
I love selling reference-based pricing because it forces me to be at my best every day. Listen, we have a solution that is still in the early adopter stage. There's a lot of perceived friction and noise that comes with RBP. And it's a tough sell because it's not just a financial sell, and it's not just a health insurance sale. For reference-based pricing, it's ultimately a change management. So I've seen entities where we're saving them 34%, right? And that's just on the stop loss, because you're going to outperform the stop loss in the real claims experience.
Sure.
And them not make the move because they perceive that they couldn't handle the change that's necessary.
Yeah.
So RBP, it's about finances, yes. It's about health insurance, yes. But I'm finding more and more The groups that are willing to take the step of empowerment are groups that can embrace the dynamic of change. If they fear change, they're not going to do it. And in some cases, I've actually said to groups, I don't think you're ready to do this.
Right.
Because it requires something on the part of leadership to partner with us on a continual, ongoing education basis.
Right.
If you're not willing to do your part as a leader, particularly in the first year or two,
Right.
it's not going to work.
Yeah. No, and I think that's an excellent point. I think first and foremost, you have to know who you're getting into bed with. You have to know who your providers are. And it's not easy, as a broker, I could tell you, it's not easy selecting a TPA because there's a lot that I have found, and it's not only through personal experience and learning the hard way, but it's through horror stories with my fellow brokers and advisors. They drop the ball. And, I personally can't work with folks like that. Like, mistakes are fine. If you tell me that you make mistakes, okay, what do you do about it? And how long does it take you to fix it?
Yeah.
And do you fix it? That's what's important. And because, look, I don't care if you're going from a fully insured plan from United to Cigna, people are going to scream like stuck pigs, right? My provider's
change.
not a network. Right? Like it's the end of the world. But, we do business across the country. In the New York metro market where I am, if you go out onto the exchange and you want the quote-unquote best, highest platinum plan, family coverage, United Healthcare, on the exchange, you'll have the privilege of paying over $70,000 a year for that policy, right? And so, I don't know who the fools are who buy that, but they are out there. But the reality is you have to ask yourself as a business leader, am I being fiscally responsible?
Yes.
It's a whole other conversation about the CAA and your responsibility as an employer to manage plan assets in the same way that you would a 401k, which is not a new thing, but it's becoming
more prevalent.
But the answer is this doesn't necessarily have to be your biggest expense after payroll.
Right.
It can be something that, and the whole conversation and the spin on it doesn't have to be about the gloom and the doom and the pitfalls and where your incumbent broker wants you to focus.
Right.
However, you must be aware of what those pitfalls are. And so I think if you're dealing with a good advisory team, if you're dealing with a good provider like Homestead, and you're doing the work and you're having the conversations, and you internalize it with your leadership team first, and you're on board because you can't sustain this any longer. You can't continue to have people work more for less every year because it's being eaten up by their healthcare budget. And what if, by the way, you can have a custom plan where if they accept steerage and they choose to go where the quality is highest and the cost is lowest, they have a path to $0 out of pocket to the boots on the ground. I don't know. You've had a career in HR, pretty big one. Do you think there's something to be said about recruiting and retention?
There's a huge recruiting and retention bonus by implementing those types of plans. What I find is I want to be careful about what I say and how I say this. I want to be concise. When you engage with the leaders, right? So more often than not, I want to be able to have the opportunity to have a strategic conversation with the leadership of a company and to ask them a couple of questions. What's your long-term cost containment strategy? And everything else you do in your business, you have a strategy. And it's across a multi-year platform.
Yeah.
Do you bring that same discipline, those same set of competencies to the lens of healthcare? Most don't.
Yeah.
They just wing it from year to year, cross the fingers and hope, I hope it's just 15% increase, right? So it's a strategic conversation. And then I'll give you this example of a large charter school system that we were working with. And their broker wasn't as consultative as Health Rosetta brokers are.
Okay.
And they wanted to maintain the status quo because it was easier for them to maintain the status quo. And we're going through the numbers and everything. We're showing them 38% savings. And for the first time, because when you're on a traditional plan, you don't get to see your data.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know.
Right.
So they're looking and they're like, wait a minute. We spent $4.6 million in premium to cover $1.8 million in claims. And he said to the broker, he said, is that right? And I'm sitting there like, yes.
He's paying attention.
Like, what you gonna say now? And he's like, I think the decision is clear about what we're gonna do. And oftentimes groups, because of their advisors, don't necessarily have the empowerment to take a look at their health situation through a large lens like that. Getting all the data on the table and being informed as a fiduciary like they do in every other part of their business.
Right.
Like if someone came to them and said, man, your supply chain costs are going up double digit every year for the next 3 years, somebody's getting fired.
Right.
They're looking into that.
Oh, hell yeah.
They're going to find another solution.
Right.
But the prevailing paradigm of the status quo when it comes to healthcare, because people believe that the ability for their employees to get the care that they need is attached to these very traditional models
Right.
that aren't necessarily aligned to the financial interest of the group. When I came into the industry, one of the first things that I saw was, and I hate to do this to Ray, but that I realized quickly the healthcare system's not broken. See, broke implies not functioning according to design.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
It's working just the way they designed it.
That's so true.
It's working just the way they designed it.
Right.
So it just wasn't designed to work for employers and employees. And so people are spending all this time and all this energy to try to fix something that's not broke. We all grew up with the adage that says, if it ain't broke,
Don't fix it.
don't fix it.
Right.
So the question isn't how do we fix it? The question is innovate.
Right.
And, if you want to, this sounds simple,
Yep.
but it's a paradigm shift. If you want to pay less for healthcare, you must be committed to a model that's actually designed to pay less for healthcare.
Correct. I couldn't have said it better myself. And a lot of thought went into the name of this podcast.
Yeah.
And so you are 100% correct in that the system isn't broken for all of the people that are making money hand over fist.
Yeah.
It's working exactly as intended.
But for the rest of us, highly dysfunctional.
Yes. And if you ask people, what do you think about healthcare? I think the first thing that rolls off of their tongue, the first thing that comes to mind is it's broken. Like it needs an overhaul. And I think everyone agrees with that. And I agree with you completely. Like it's if you want to pay less for healthcare, you have to pay less for healthcare because 80% of your spend, 85% is claims. If you're not doing anything to manage claims other than point people to a network where there are providers, which is doing nothing for claims, you're going to keep spending more.
And one of the things we try to do in our plan designs is structure different point solutions and different platforms of care, because I think you would agree with this. Anything you can do to keep someone from walking through hospital doors, right? Whether it's special surgical centers, other places, imaging centers, anything to keep people from out of the hospital doors, you're already making a dent and cost. The moment they walk through that door is the moment now your financial stability, your plan is now in jeopardy.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we've gotten kind of way off the rails, right? Because the whole concept of insurance is to protect people from catastrophic financial loss. And we have insurance policies that cover everything, so people are just conditioned to use their health insurance like a Pez dispenser. Like, boom, there's another one. Boom, there's another one. Especially in urban neighborhoods where there aren't doctors' offices, where do people go? They go to the emergency room, right?
Highest form of care there is.
Exactly. And so the most expensive care and the most prevalent in those communities, that's a problem. But I think we have to get back to a place where we have plans that are designed to protect us financially from the true risk.
Yep.
And, that threshold is going to be different depending upon household income and where people are at. But for the most part, we're spending an awful lot of money for services that largely go unused, especially if we're talking about the younger, healthier population. They're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year on policies that they never use or touch.
And these traditional PPO policies are kind of cookie cutter, and you got to take it or leave it. There's no capacity to flex and design. And with Homestead, our health plan, we provide a great deal of flexibility so that the employer can customize his plan according to his culture and the financial needs of their employees. We have a bunch of set plans, but then we can also customize. When groups come on, we work with them to say, okay, what are the things in your plan you want covered or don't want covered? And that's really an unusual thing when you're working with folks, because they're so used to the traditional saying, no, this is what we cover and this is it. You take it or leave it.
Right.
And the ability to custom design that. And then we educate them. If you choose to include that, here's how that may impact the overall financial stability of your plan, right? Or, yes, this may be a cost, but by you making this investment in this item here, you're going to prevent costs further down the road.
Right.
So we take a real consultative approach with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think so typically what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll look at what their plan covers today. And then we'll look to mirror that, but also, point out anything that might be a red flag, anything that might be, just either, I don't want to say excess coverage, but maybe an employer is not even aware that they have the ability to make a change that may make a material difference on the back end in terms of stop loss, et cetera, et cetera. And now we have, these immunotherapy drugs and these gene therapy drugs, and some of them can go into the millions of dollars. And so there are so many employers out there, large employers, enterprise employers, that they have a legal team to scrutinize every document that comes through their door, if it's a real estate acquisition or M&A or this or that. But when it comes to their health care policy and contracts, they don't look at any of it. And it literally, it could be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're not putting eyes on it, and they're not getting any counsel or advice on, hey, maybe we ought to rethink this, or maybe this clause needs to be removed, or is it compliant with the CAA? Because gag clauses are a big thing that don't belong in contracts anymore. They're still out there. They're still in there. And so I think as employers, HR leaders become more savvy, CFOs become more savvy, you're going to see more scrutinization, a little more time and money spent on the back end to save them a ton of money on the front end. And I think, so tell us just a little bit about how do you go direct to market to employers? Is that your thrust? Are you going through brokers and advisors that are bringing you business? Is it all of the above?
All of the above.
All the above.
All of the above. So our primary distribution pipeline is through broker relationships. We highly value broker relationships. They have the ear and the trust of the group. Right. We do engage in direct market to employers, and we may have an initial conversation. I got a big conversation with a big bank next week, and it's going to be an initial conversation with their leadership. But then we tell them, let's bring your broker to the table. Because ultimately, they're going to make that decision not based on your word, but they're
Right.
going to make that based on their trusted advisor. And so what we've learned is better to bring them into the conversation as early as possible. And then we work through a bunch of different associations. So we have the CFO Alliance that we work with. It's a national association of CFOs, obviously. And we go direct with them, but it's the same process. Eventually, we are bringing their advisor to the table to partner with us in the decision.
I'm curious about that because first of all, I'll go on record as saying brokers typically, in my experience, are funny, charismatic. They're great people persons. They know how to play the game. Typically they end up being best buddies or friends with HR, with leadership. And we know statistically that they could do a bad job, meaning bringing their clients double-digit increases year over year and keep their job. The average tenure is 6 years for a broker. But if they're playing, especially if you're playing with, the big dogs, the big privately held brokerages, and certainly the publicly traded brokerages, they're in the pockets of the insurance carriers. And it's not in their interest to do business in your model because they're going to lose money and they're going to lose revenue. Now, on the flip side, they may keep a client if they go over to the dark side and they do work with a Homestead. But in my experience, like the rubber really has to meet the road. And I wonder about the wisdom of bringing in, without naming any names, we all know the brokers that I'm talking about. You're bringing their rep to the table. How receptive are they?
I think what happened, because in the beginning we didn't, and then what we found is by the time they came, I had an adversary.
Yeah, right.
And now everything, all the progress we made now gets bogged down.
Ground to a halt.
Yeah, right. Because we're the enemy.
Right.
So it's better to bring them in, confront that. There's two dynamics that I found that are necessary. One has to do with, we'll talk about the financials, we'll talk about the insurance dynamic piece, but there's another piece that I think is essential for the business owners to recognize, and that is the broker works for you. And you have to drive this process.
Right.
If you're not willing you to drive this process. So there's a group that we've onboarded, private equity group, and the owner is on the board of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve. He's got a bunch of PE portfolios. He gave us one. He says, "You do right with that. We'll open up the rest to you." I'm like, "Awesome, great." He took a very direct approach, and he said to the broker, "This is what we're going to do."
Yeah.
So it's really
bold leadership.
Bold leadership.
Bold leadership is really what it boils down to.
And it's that whole change thing. And am I committed to bringing the type of change to our health benefits on behalf of the financial stability of our organization and the overall quality of solution we provide to members? Am I really committed to that outcome?
Yeah.
And what's hard is I can't call out the broker.
Right.
I want to.
Right.
But I can't.
Right. Well, and it's not necessarily to villainize the broker.
Right.
I'm a capitalist through and through. I love capitalism, love Ken Langone's book. I love capitalism. And I think it's any organization, nonprofit or profit, their goal is to generate revenue. That's it. At the end of sentence, like period, end of sentence. I have no problem with business for business. The trouble in healthcare and the problem that I have with the status quo model is that as a broker, I should not be in a position where I deliver increases to my client and simultaneously have my compensation increase.
That's the part.
That creates an incredible conflict of interest. And anybody that is in that sort of a model, sorry for my language, but what the fuck are you doing? Right? That's not how business works. You need to hold your brokers and your partners accountable. And the objective should be, we want the highest quality healthcare for our internal clients, our second family, the people that we work with, for them and their family members, we demand the highest quality health care possible. Let's start there. That's number one. Number two, we want that highest quality health care delivered for the lowest possible cost. That's common sense stuff. It doesn't get more complicated than that. So it sounds to me like that's exactly what you're doing at Homestead. Are you happy?
I'm thrilled. I am. Listen, RBP is a tough sell. Right? It's a tough space.
And why is it tough? It's tough because it's not the delivery system that people are accustomed to. We're taking them out of their comfort zone. And so what I find is it's not going to be the right fit for everybody. Let's just say that out of the gate. Your organization may be a candidate for it, may not be a candidate for it, but it doesn't only have to be RBP. There are other solutions and ways to skin a cat.
Like we do a couple of different things. We'll provide a dual option for groups, particularly larger groups over like 300 or so. We'll say, listen, let's crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
I call it the democratic choice. Let's put it before your folks, and they can choose a PPO or an RBP. We'll heavily incentivize the RBP. Right? And what generally happens is by the third year, you start the first year 70% PPO, 80% PPO, 20% RBP. By the third year, it switches. Yeah. Because the word gets around. Right. So that's one of the things. I think what makes it most challenging is you're really asking, you alluded to this earlier. So you're asking people whose really their business expertise and their focus is widgets. And you're asking them to be an expert in our industry. Correct. Which can be complicated. Yeah. And they're like, listen, I just want to make widgets. Right. I'm going to leave this to my advisor, and he's gonna tell me. Right. And a lot of times, what I've run into is advisors who've been burnt by RBP. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah. 4 or 5 years ago, RBP was the wild, wild west. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And there's been people that's been burnt by it. Yeah. And oftentimes, when I talk with consultants, advisors, brokers, they'll say, "Listen, I don't want to get fired." Right. And one of the things that we've built into our culture at Homestead, because we were part of that wild, wild west. We had some wild years, man. Yeah. We have 2 primary missions. One is to deliver value to our clients, and then 2 is to protect the reputation of the broker that brought us to the table.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and really, I think so. It's still the Wild Wild West in a sense. We're in the early days, right? All right, so maybe it's not quite the Wild Wild West that it once was, but it very much still is. I think it's important to just kind of put that out there. But I think the biggest piece is you have to set expectations. Yes. If you're, in any business, pick a business, manufacturer, service-oriented, whatever the business is or organization may be. Maybe it's an educational institution. You just don't want, as leadership, you don't want to be blindsided. Right. And you don't want your employees and their family members to be blindsided, to be sold a false bill of goods. So I think with RBP or any strategy, because RBP is one of many numerous strategies, but in any strategy where you're changing from what people were used to, there's a change involved. It's really important to share with them the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's what can go wrong. Here's what will happen. Not can happen. Here's what will happen. And here's what we will do when that happens. That changes things because people just don't want to be left with their ass hanging out. They want to know that, hey, yes, we talked about this. And the reality is, I've never experienced the case where someone didn't get the care that they needed. The road getting there might have had a bunch of twists and turns, but they're always going to get the care that they need.
And that's the biggest concern that groups will have. Can my members get the care that they need? Because in their minds, you don't have a network.
Right. Yep.
Right? I can get care without network.
Yep,
right?
of course.
As if the surgeon is in the scrub room.
Right.
And that person on an RBP plan is laid out on the table, and the surgeon looks on the screen and he says, "What? They don't have a buka? Put away those sharp scalpels. Bring me the rusty scalpel. Bring out that old used knee.
Right.
Right. That's kind of. It sounds hilarious, but that's kind of like the ideal people have in their mind.
No, but David, the reality is in a traditional, fully insured plan, the network is so broad. You may be getting surgeon rusty scalpel, right? You may be.
True.
Whereas in a custom plan, I think we have the ability to curate care. That's one of the cornerstones of a good custom plan is having a team that's dedicated to finding the highest quality providers.
I'll give you a specific example. We just onboarded a group in Denver, restaurant chain, and we worked with leadership because when something goes wrong on the plan, isn't it always
the CFO, the CEO's wife,
right?
Always.
So we asked for all of leaderships. Tell us all of your physicians you're seeing. Tell us all the specialty meds that you're seeing, and then we worked to make sure that they were either in the prime, because we use a primary care physician network prime, right? So that highest point of utilization on any plan, that's covered. And the first thing we do is we survey a group's provider universe. Tell us all your primary care physicians. Do you have an appointment coming up in the first month? We don't want you reaching out to the doctor and explaining the name on your card. We will reach out to the doctor on your behalf. We call it clear the path. And we're going to explain to them the most important thing they want to know. What am I going to get paid and how am I going to get paid? And we're going to take care of that.
Yep.
So we did that for the group. We did that for their RX side, and that helped them to be able to make the change because, to your point, it's that continuity of care. Small percentage of people on the plan actually use a primary care physician, but those that do don't want to change.
Right.
So if we can reach out and make sure that there's that continuity of care, we do all of that before the group goes live.
Yeah.
So group comes on board 60 days out or 45 days out or
Right.
sometimes 30 days out.
we like to avoid those.
Yeah. The first thing we start doing is reaching out to their care universe. So by the time the plan goes live and members are actually utilizing the plan, we've already cleared the path for them to get the care that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. So, there are a lot of moving parts to this, right? We covered a lot of ground today. What is the easiest way for people to find you? How do they get to David Jones?
Two ways. You can go to Homestead plans.com. You could find me on LinkedIn, or you could email me directly, dsjones@homesteadplans.com.
That seems simple enough. Homestead is spelled just like it sounds, right?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. And basically, if anyone is intrigued, has any questions, wants to know more about how Homestead plans work, you'd be happy, I'm sure, to enlighten them and kind of take them through the process.
Yeah, we are all about the first step in the process. It's all about education. So we welcome every opportunity to enlighten, inform, and educate.
Right. Awesome. Well, David, I am honored that you took some of your time to be here with us and educate and enlighten our audience. Tell us about your personal story. You went deep. We really appreciate that. And look, folks, I think that my job is to, help find guests that are interesting. And I don't think, I wasn't disappointed today. If you are, you probably tuned out a long time ago. But we have a guy here that he shared an incredible story and has been on a journey. And it didn't have to turn out this way, David. You could have been 6 feet under with, 17, 18 of your buddies, and it didn't turn out that way for you. You found a way to thread the needle and get out the other side, and in your words, by the grace of God. Yeah. And so, really appreciate you being here. But I look to work with people who are going to be there when the chips are down, when the shit hits the fan, because it always does.
Yes.
And regardless of the organization that you partner with, it's the people in that organization that are going to get the job done. And if they're quality people, they're part of a quality organization. And what I tell people is, look, I don't recall the last time that it took us longer than 24 hours to respond to a request for action. Typically, it's much quicker than that. And I'm not saying that it's going to be thoroughly resolved in 24 hours. Sometimes circumstances go beyond your control. But I look to partner with people who are as responsive as I am.
Yeah.
So that I know, look, if I have a problem, if I have an issue, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to call David, and David is going to fix that problem. And I think you have that guy in David Jones. So
Our philosophy is the problem is never the problem. The response to the problem is the problem. If you have a problem, you respond, you fix it, you've strengthened the relationship. If you don't fix it, you've just now undermined the relationship.
Right. Yeah, well said. Let's leave it there. Really appreciate you being our guest today. Homestead Health Plans. Do I have that right?
Homestead Health Plans.
Homestead Health Plans. HomesteadHealthPlans.com. HomesteadHealthPlans.com.
HomesteadPlans.com.
HomesteadPlans.com. Let's get that right. HomesteadPlans.com. David Jones, you're the man. Appreciate you being
Thanks,
here.
Ray.
Folks, until next time, peace and love always. Take care.
All right, that's a wrap. Hit like, follow, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.